Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. The Harry Potter films have always been a source of debate. Some see them as a magnificent embodiment of the magical world, while others consider them a distorted shadow of the books. Indeed, screenwriters and directors often simplified, altered, or even lost the essence of certain scenes, which is why readers and viewers sometimes perceive the same characters in radically different ways. But it's not all that bad. The Potter cinematic universe isn't just full of errors and odd choices, and it also contains genuinely brilliant moments where the spirit of the books is preserved and the visual storytelling makes the story even stronger. That's what we'll talk about today. Enjoy the video. Number 1. How dare you stand where he stood? This scene from The Deathly Hallows Part 2 is one of the most powerful moments in the entire franchise. Harry Potter, thought to be dead, and the most wanted wizard in Britain, suddenly appears in the Great Hall of Hogwarts, face to face with Severus Snape. How dare you stand where he stood? His voice rings like a challenge. The moment is filled with drama and symbolism. McGonagall steps in front of Harry, defending him from Snape, while Snape himself, with a swift motion, disarms his followers, a subtle touch that shows he's not a villain, but a man playing a double game. In the book, this duel between McGonagall and Snape also exists, but it takes place in a corridor with Flitwick and Sprout helping her. Snape doesn't make any grand speeches and doesn't truly fight. He simply retreats, knowing his mission is nearing its end. The cinematic version heightens the emotion, giving the moment grandeur and epic weight. It's not canon, but it's great cinema. Number 2. It doesn't matter that Harry's gone. Neville Longbottom, a character long underestimated by viewers, becomes the very face of hope when all seems lost. In the finale of The Deathly Hallows, Voldemort triumphantly enters Hogwarts, and the defenders of the school sink into despair. Then Neville steps forward. People die every day. Yeah, Harry's gone, but he's still with us, right here. His speech is the essence of Gryffindor courage. He may not be the chosen one, but he stands right beside him in spirit. After Neville's words, no one doubts that the fight isn't over, and when he draws the sword of Gryffindor and kills Nagini, it's pure catharsis. In the book, the scene is different. Neville charges at Voldemort only to be quickly disarmed and forced to wear the sorting hat as it burns on his head. A dark and painful image, but without cinematic heroism. The movie version is far more emotionally powerful. It doesn't weaken canon, it enhances it. Number 3. You saw it yourselves. Spectacle is cinema's strongest weapon. Where a book can afford slow pacing and detailed explanations, a film must dazzle. Take the pudding scene from The Chamber of Secrets. In the book, Dobby simply drops the cake on the floor, and Harry is blamed, unseen by witnesses. Modest, mundane, almost childish. In the film, the scene becomes a brilliant piece of comic chaos. The pudding floats above the guests' heads before crashing down onto them. The Dursleys' eyes widen, the guests gasp. Magic right under their noses. Harry's desperate attempt to fix things only makes it worse. It's a stroke of genius from director Chris Columbus. A funny, vivid scene that perfectly sets the film's tone. Sometimes cinema can, when should, do more than the book. Number 4. Dumbledore's privilege. In The Half-Blood Prince, there's a moment that puzzled many fans. When Harry reminds Dumbledore that one cannot apparate inside Hogwarts, the headmaster calmly replies, "Well, being me has its privileges," and they vanish. It seems as if the director ignored one of the franchise's fundamental rules for convenience, since canon clearly states that apparition inside Hogwarts is impossible due to its magical protections, but the violation is only partial. In the books, it's mentioned that Dumbledore can lift the protection, for example, to allow apparition lessons. So technically, he could do it selectively. The book even confirms it. To give you the opportunity to practice, the headmaster has lifted the ban, but only within the Great Hall, and only for 1 hour. Of course, the film loses a few interesting details because of this shortcut, like the Hogsmeade scene, the talk with Madame Rosmerta, and the hint about Dumbledore's brother. But overall, it's a fair compromise, not a failure. Number 5, Observant Harry. One of the most atmospheric scenes in The Prisoner of Azkaban is the nighttime moment with the Marauder's map, when Harry runs into Snape. "Well, well, Lupin, out for a little walk in the moonlight," the professor sneers. Though the line doesn't exist in the book, the scene works perfectly. In the original, a similar moment happens by day. Draco complains to Snape about seeing Harry in Hogsmeade. Yet in the book, Harry misses Peter Pettigrew's name on the map, a crucial detail that the movie changes, but this change improves the story. In the film, the scene becomes darker, tenser, and Harry shows sharper awareness. The atmosphere grows mysterious and foreboding, and canon isn't broken, and emoji do appear on the map. In the book, it's Lupin who spots Peter. In the movie, it's Harry. "Even if you're hidden under an invisibility cloak, the map will show you," says Lupin. It's one of those rare deviations where the film strengthens the scene without breaking the logic of the world. Number 6. The Dance with Fleur. The Yule Ball scene in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire is one of the most dazzling sequences in the entire series. The Great Hall glows with ice blue light, the floor gleams like crystal, and the students, nervous, excited, awkward, step into a world that feels almost adult. Director Mike Newell transforms a simple school event into a moment of revelation. Harry, played by Daniel Radcliffe, stands stiffly beside Parvati Patil, unsure of every move, while Ron sulks in his outdated dress robes, glaring at Victor Crumb and Hermione. Then the camera finds Hermione radiant in her pink gown, and for the first time, she isn't just the clever girl with frizzy hair, she's a young woman who's growing up before our eyes. In J.K. Rowling's book, the ball is described with humour and observation. Ron looked as though he had never seen anything so horrible in his life, she writes, focusing on his jealousy rather than the event itself. The emotions are there, but they're quieter, hidden between lines. The film gives them colour, light, and music. When the band The Weird Sisters begins to play, and Fred Weasley twirls Angelina across the floor, even Professor McGonagall smiles faintly, a rare human touch. The moment bridges childhood and maturity. Beneath the laughter and the dancing lies something deeper, the realization that Hogwarts isn't just a school of magic, it's a place where hearts begin to change. Number 7. The silence after Sirius's death. The death of Sirius Black in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix is one of the few moments where the film captures grief better than the book. In Rowling's text, it happens fast. He was falling through the ancient archway and disappearing beyond the veil, as though melting into the shadow beyond it. Harry screams, but the chaos of battle swallows everything. It's shocking but distant, like a nightmare you can't process yet. Director David Yates changed that distance into intimacy. When Bellatrix's spell hits Sirius, time slows. The veil ripples like water. Gary Oldman's expression is peaceful, almost accepting, and then he's gone. Then comes silence. Daniel Radcliffe's scream fills the screen, but no sound comes out. The world seems to vanish around him, The absence of noise becomes the sound of grief itself. No music, no dialogue, just emptiness. That silence lasts only a few seconds, but it feels eternal. It's a moment of pure cinema translating pain into something physical. When Lupin grabs Harry and holds him back, whispering, "There's nothing you can do," the audience feels the same helplessness. The film doesn't just show the loss of a godfather, it makes you live it. Number 8, Snape's final look. The death of Severus Snape in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 2, is one of the few moments where cinema deepened the story's emotion beyond the page. Inside the Shrieking Shack, as Nagini's cage slams shut, Snape falls to the floor, bleeding and gasping. The camera stays close to his face. His eyes search for Harry's, desperate and full of unspoken words. "Look at me," he whispers, and for the first time his voice trembles. The line isn't in the book exactly that way, but it defines him. He wants to see Lily's eyes alive again in her son before he dies. In J.K. Rowling's novel, the scene moves quickly. The green eyes found the black, but after a second, something in the depths of the dark pair seemed to vanish, leaving them fixed, glassy, empty. It's a powerful image, but distant. The book gives us facts, the film gives us grief. Alan Rickman's performance transforms Snape's stoic cruelty into quiet tragedy. Every blink, every shallow breath carries decades of guilt and love. When he presses his memories into Harry's hands, it feels like a confession, his final truth, passed like a sacred gift. What follows, Harry entering Snape's memories, is the heart of the story revealed at last. The gentle always when Dumbledore asks, "After all this time?" becomes a whisper that echoes through the whole saga. Composer Alexandre Desplat's soft, mournful score turns the moment into something eternal. The audience doesn't just learn that Snape loved Lily, they feel the unbearable weight of a man who spent his life protecting her son in silence. The book told us he was brave. The film made us believe it. Number 9, Harry and Voldemort, The Last Duel. The final battle between Harry Potter and Lord Voldemort in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 2, is pure visual poetry. It takes place not in front of a crowd, as in the book, but within the crumbling halls of Hogwarts. The air trembles as two spells collide, green and red light twisting together, reflecting off shattered stone. Daniel Radcliffe's face is tense, almost calm, while Ralph Fiennes moves like a predator, every gesture sharp and fluid. The marble courtyard shakes, cloaks ripple like waves, and for a few seconds, good and evil are perfectly balanced. In J.K. Rowling's novel, the same duel is stripped down to its essence. "Avada Kedavra!" Voldemort screamed. "Expelliarmus!" Harry cried. The two spells met, and Voldemort fell, dead, ordinary, almost pitiful. The meaning was in the words, not the spectacle. The point was moral, not visual. Evil collapses under its own arrogance. But on film, director David Yates gives the audience what years of storytelling have built toward, a grand, almost biblical clash. The camera follows them as they fall from the tower, their faces inches apart, their magic tearing the air apart. It's exaggerated, yes, but it feels earned. When Voldemort finally disintegrates into ash, it's not just his body that vanishes, it's his shadow over the wizarding world. The silence that follows feels like mourning after a long night. In the book, his corpse lies still. Tom Riddle's body lay there, white and empty, the same as any other man's. But cinema demands a different kind of closure. Watching the Dark Lord dissolve into dust gives the audience the release that words alone cannot provide. It isn't just a death, it's redemption for a world that can finally breathe again. Number 10, Epilogue, 19 years later. The Epilogue of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Part 2 is simple, quiet, and deeply emotional. 19 years after the Battle of Hogwarts, Harry, Ginny, Ron, and Hermione stand on Platform 934, watching their children board the Hogwarts Express. The steam rises, the music swells, time itself seems to pause. We see familiar faces transformed by age, yet unchanged in spirit. They are no longer warriors, they are parents, passing the torch to a new generation. In J.K. Rowling's book, the same scene exists, but it reads almost like an afterword. He felt that Albus Severus would never be a child who was forgotten. It tells us where everyone ended up, who married whom, who named their child after Snape. But the emotion is buried in words. The film gives those words breath. When Harry kneels beside his son and whispers, "Albus Severus Potter, you were named after 2 headmasters of Hogwarts. One of them was a Slytherin, and he was probably the bravest man I ever knew." The audience finally understands what forgiveness sounds like. Director David Yates and the actors chose restraint over spectacle. There are no spells, no villains, no battles, just the sound of a train whistle echoing through the station. Hermione smiles softly. Ron laughs at his own joke. Ginny takes Harry's hand. And when the train begins to move, the camera lingers on Harry's face as he says, almost to himself, "All was well." It's a line from the book, but in the film it lands like a blessing. That final shot, Harry watching the train vanish into the mist, isn't just an ending. It's a farewell to childhood, both his and ours. The story that began with a boy receiving his first letter from Hogwarts ends with him sending his own child there. The circle closes. Magic doesn't end, it changes hands. And as the music fades, every viewer, no matter their age, feels it too. All was, indeed, well. Number 11, Voldemort Without a Nose. Ralph Fiennes's portrayal of Lord Voldemort changed the way the world saw evil. When he first appears in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, rising from the cauldron in the graveyard, the transformation is terrifying. His face is pale and slick like marble, his nose gone, replaced by snake-like slits. The design, created through hours of digital work and prosthetics, turned the character into something more than human, a symbol of what happens when someone destroys his own soul in pursuit of immortality. In J.K. Rowling's book, the description is already chilling. He was no longer human. The face was whiter than a skull, with wide, livid scarlet eyes and slits for nostrils. The line gives the reader space to imagine horror, but the film takes that imagination and gives it a body. When Voldemort steps closer to Harry and whispers, "I can touch you now?" his fingers sliding across the boy's face, the audience flinches. It's not just the words, it's the unnatural calm, the serpent-like poise, the way his voice seems to crawl under your skin. The lack of a nose became more than a visual effect. It became a metaphor. Voldemort's inhumanity was no longer hidden in words. You could see it. His face no longer belonged to a man. It belonged to a creature that had shed all traces of love and empathy. Even when he smiles, the movement feels wrong, as though his body itself rejects the idea of warmth. Every time he appears, the air seems to grow colder, and the characters instinctively step back. That's why Fiennes's Voldemort is unforgettable. The books describe his evil. The films make you feel it. His presence is like poison seeping into every scene. And in the end, when his body turns to ash and drifts away, it feels right. The monster without a nose, without humanity, finally disappears into nothing, exactly what he feared most. Number 12. Silence after Dumbledore's fall. When Severus Snape casts the fatal spell, time itself seems to stop. In the film Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, there is no dramatic score, no cries, no chaos, only silence. Albus Dumbledore falls slowly from the astronomy tower, and that silence feels alive, cutting through the air like a spell of mourning. The camera lingers on his face, the night swallowing the greatest wizard of the age. It's not just death, it's the end of an era. In J.K. Rowling's book, the moment unfolds differently. A jet of green light shot from the end of Snape's wand and hit Dumbledore squarely in the chest. For a split second he seemed to hang suspended beneath the gleaming skull, and then he fell slowly backward, like a great rag doll, over the battlements. The scene is written through Harry's helpless eyes. He's frozen by a binding curse and can do nothing but watch. It's powerful, but internal. The emotion lives inside the reader's imagination, quiet and unseen. The film turns that inattention outward. As Dumbledore's body hits the ground, the castle stands still. Then, one by one, students and teachers raise their wands into the night. Light fills the courtyard as hundreds of tiny stars drive away the dark mark. No words are spoken. The act says everything: gratitude, sorrow, respect. When Professor McGonagall lifts her wand first, you can almost feel her whisper, "Goodbye, Albus." That silence, not a line, not a melody, becomes the soul of the scene. The book gives us the fact of death. The film gives us the grief that follows. For a few seconds, the audience joins Hogwarts in mourning. You don't just watch Dumbledore fall, you feel the world grow colder without him. Number 13, The Battle of Hogwarts, Chaos and Light. When the Battle of Hogwarts begins on screen, it feels like the world of magic itself is cracking open. The night sky is no longer serene or filled with mystery. It burns, it screams, it trembles. The film captures something that the book could only suggest through words: the sheer visual chaos of war. Towers crumble under blasts of green and crimson light. The familiar courtyards of Hogwarts, once filled with laughter and lessons, become a battlefield. The air glows with spells colliding mid-air, each one a burst of desperate defiance. The filmmakers took J.K. Rowling's vision and turned it into an apocalyptic canvas, one where every flash of light carries a story and every scream echoes the end of an era. In the book, the battle unfolds through Harry's perspective, a whirlwind of running, searching, and fighting. Rowling wrote, "The castle grounds were full of the noise of battle cries and the crack of curses." It is vivid in its own right, but the focus is emotional rather than visual. We sense the terror and confusion, but we imagine the rest. The film, however, strips away the distance between imagination and experience. When Death Eaters rain curses from the skies and defenders raise their wands in unison, the camera moves like a living witness. The viewer becomes part of the storm, what Rowling described in sentences David Yates transformed into a living nightmare of stone and flame. The moment Professor McGonagall animates the statues is where the film transcends the page. Her face, illuminated by the flicker of torches and the glow of defensive charms, carries both exhaustion and authority. When she raises her wand and calls upon the ancient protectors of Hogwarts, the walls themselves seem to awaken. Massive stone knights tear themselves from their pedestals, armor clanking, swords raised high. The sound reverberates through the hall, a deep, trembling call to arms. In the book, the same event passes more quietly. McGonagall brandished her wand and statues sprang to life, a sentence that leaves much to the imagination. The film, on the other hand, grants this scene its full majesty, showing us the castle as a living being finally rising to defend its children. Visually, this sequence bridges fantasy and history. The stone guardians look like medieval crusaders carved centuries ago, now returning to fulfill an ancient promise. Their heavy steps shake the corridors as they march into the mist, shields glowing faintly with runes. The camera pans across the great hall where students, professors, and even house elves prepare for war. The familiar school suddenly feels like a fortress, not a place of learning, but of last stands. This transformation from sanctuary to battlefield gives the scene a depth that no text alone could convey. It is the visual revelation of what the book only hinted at, that magic, in the end, is not merely wonder, but also sacrifice. The film's depiction of the defensive enchantments adds another layer of emotional gravity. When the protective dome rises over Hogwarts, shimmering like a translucent veil, it is both beautiful and tragic. As Death Eater's spells crash against it, sparks scatter like falling stars. The audience can feel the shield weaken, see the magical energy strain to hold. It becomes a metaphor for the last fragile barrier between innocence and destruction. The book describes this moment briefly, with Rowling noting that a shield charm flashed into place, but the film slows down, allowing the viewer to feel the tension. The castle itself seems alive, breathing, trembling, aware of its impending doom. Inside the chaos, the film manages to preserve moments of human emotion that shine through the darkness. The brief exchange of glances between Neville Longbottom and Seamus Finnegan as they ready their explosives, the calm determination in Molly Weasley's eyes before she faces Bellatrix Lestrange, all of these details add layers that words can scarcely achieve. The camera lingers on faces covered in dust and fear, faces of those who have grown up within these walls. In the book, these moments are scattered across pages, but the film compresses them into a single current of emotion, where every expression tells a story of loss, courage, and belonging. The appearance of giants and acromantulas turns the battle into a nightmare beyond human comprehension. Rowling mentions their involvement, but on the page, the imagination softens their horror. The film removes that filter. When a giant smashes through a tower or swings a tree trunk like a club, the audience feels the scale of destruction in their bones. The flames illuminating the forbidden forest, the screams echoing through shattered corridors. This is not merely fantasy, it is cinematic apocalypse. The magical world, once a refuge from reality, becomes a reflection of it, a place where courage means standing even as everything familiar burns. Among the most haunting visuals is the sight of the Dementors sweeping over the battlefield. Their presence turns the air cold, their silhouettes twisting against the moonlit smoke. The book tells us that Dementors moved across the grounds like dark smudges, but the film transforms this line into terror incarnate. The screen dims as they glide forward, the music dissolving into an echoing hum. It is a reminder that war in the wizarding world is not just physical destruction, but the draining of hope itself. The Patronus charms that push them back flare like beacons of faith, a visual prayer in the middle of chaos. Number 14, Hermione erases her parents' memory. When the first part of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows reached the screen in 2010, viewers witnessed a moment that was both intimate and devastating. Hermione Granger, standing in the living room of her childhood home, wand trembling slightly as she whispers, "Obliviate." The scene lasts less than a minute, but it holds the weight of an entire lifetime. Photographs fade from the mantelpiece, her smiling face vanishes from family portraits. Her parents, unaware of the loss, continue their quiet evening, no longer knowing they ever had a daughter. The house remains the same, yet it feels hollow, stripped of memory, stripped of love. In that instant, Hermione becomes something more than a clever student. She becomes a woman making an impossible sacrifice. In J.K. Rowling's novel, this episode is mentioned only briefly, tucked between preparations for the journey and the growing dread of Voldemort's return. The line is cold, clinical, and fleeting. She had also modified her parents' memories so that they were convinced they were really called Wendell and Monica Wilkins, and that their life's ambition was to move to Australia. Nothing more is said. There is no description of her hesitation, no image of her childhood home, no sign of emotion beyond the fact itself. It is an act of logic, of strategy, almost bureaucratic in its precision. The reader understands what she did, but not how it felt. The film changes that completely. Director David Yates chose to open The Deathly Hallows, Part 1, with that very scene, allowing it to stand as a symbol of everything the trio is about to lose. By showing Hermione alone, Yates places her emotional journey before the adventure even begins. The lighting is soft, almost nostalgic. The warm tones of a home that has known laughter, meals, and birthdays. Emma Watson's performance captures a stillness that words cannot express. Her lips move slightly, her eyes glisten, and when the spell is cast, the quiet becomes unbearable. It is not the loud, heroic kind of bravery. It is the silent, private courage of someone erasing the people she loves most in order to save them. This cinematic addition gives Hermione a layer of humanity that even the book, rich as it is, could not fully convey. In literature, her intelligence and moral strength often define her. On screen, her vulnerability and tenderness emerge. We see her fingers linger on a family photograph, her smiling between her mother and father, all three beaming with warmth. As the magic spreads, her image disappears, but the parents' faces remain, now turned toward empty space. The audience feels the physical loss, the absence taking shape before our eyes. This visual metaphor, erasure as protection, could not exist on the page with such immediacy. In that moment, the audience understands something essential about Hermione's character. She has always been the rational one, the planner, the voice of reason beside Harry's impulsiveness and Ron's humour. Yet here, reason and emotion intertwine. She knows that the war against Voldemort will not spare anyone connected to her. Her parents, ordinary muggles, would be tortured or killed for information. Rather than trust fate, she takes control in the only way she can, by making herself vanish from their lives. It is an act of both love and despair. She ensures their safety by destroying their memories of her, condemning herself to a kind of emotional orphanhood. The film's quietness makes it even more powerful. No one speaks after the spell, no explanation, no background music at first, just the soft sound of a house settling into silence. The camera lingers on the empty frames and the walls lined with fading memories. Then Hermione steps out of the door, her wand lowered, and the music swells softly. It is Alexandre Desplat's score, melancholic, tender, like a lullaby for a lost childhood. The viewer knows that something irreversible has happened. From that point on, there is no going back. Hermione has crossed the invisible threshold between youth and adulthood. The brilliance of the scene lies in its restraint. Yates does not dramatize it with tears or outcries. Instead, he trusts the audience to feel what Hermione cannot say. The cinematography invites empathy rather than pity. Every detail in the room, the family photos, the ordinary furniture, the sunlight filtering through the curtains, grounds the magic in reality. For a story filled with dragons and spells, this moment is shockingly human. It's not about the spell itself, but about the ache that follows it. The magic is only the medium, the emotion is purely real. Emma Watson later described this as one of the hardest scenes she ever filmed. Watching her face, we understand why. Hermione's silence speaks louder than any dialogue. Her eyes carry the weight of years of love, education, and belonging. When she casts Obliviate, it is not a gesture of detachment, but one of deep attachment, love expressed through loss. The viewer senses that every part of her wishes there were another way, yet her resolve does not falter. This is the defining feature of Hermione Granger. She chooses the hard path because it is right, not because it is easy. In contrast, the novel leaves much of this emotional terrain unexplored. Rowling's focus in those early chapters of the Deathly Hallows is on movement and urgency. The impending hunt, the mission, the danger closing in. Hermione's act is one of many preparations, mentioned almost in passing as she packs the beaded bag. The line's brevity mirrors Hermione's practicality, but it also distances the reader from the heartbreak. The magic of cinema fills that gap. It shows what prose only implies: the cost of courage, the price of protection, the loneliness that comes with doing the right thing. Number 15, the growing of Harry. There is a moment in the Harry Potter films when time itself seems to pause, not because of magic, but because of the weight of growing up. It happens not in a grand duel or a spectacular spell, but in the silence between breaths, in the look on Harry's face as he realizes that innocence has quietly left him. While J.K. Rowling's books guide us through the intellectual and emotional steps of Harry's journey from boyhood to manhood, the films translate that transformation into something visual and deeply human. They do what paper cannot. They let us see the evolution of a soul. And in that sense, the cinematic portrayal of Harry's coming of age surpasses the written word. In the first film, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, we meet a boy who stares in wonder at a world too bright to be real. When Harry enters the Great Hall for the first time, his eyes widen as the candles float and the ceiling mirrors the night sky. It is the gaze of a child who believes that anything is possible. The camera lingers on his face, Daniel Radcliffe's expression still soft, his features round and open. The entire frame glows with golden light, as if Hogwarts itself is embracing him. Rowling's book gives us the line, "He had never even imagined such a strange and splendid place," but the film gives that imagination a face. The boy's wonder becomes our own, and for a moment we are reminded of the magic of seeing the world anew. As the story progresses, that same look of wonder begins to fade. By The Prisoner of Azkaban, the light changes. Alfonso Cuarón's direction brings darker shadows, colder colors, and a more intimate sense of isolation. Harry walks alone more often, framed by fog or rain, his shoulders tense beneath his robes. This is the first film where the tone shifts from fairy tale to something more real. The camera stops idolizing him as the boy who lived and begins observing him as a teenager with questions, fears, and anger. The book tells us he felt as though the happiness had gone out of him at the thought of what lay ahead. The film turns that line into a visible ache. The slump of Harry's posture, the tremor of his hands, the hardening of his eyes. We no longer see the boy who marveled at floating candles. We see a young man beginning to understand pain. That understanding deepens in The Goblet of Fire. It is here that the visual storytelling captures something the books could only describe: the irreversible shock of seeing death up close. When Cedric Diggory falls, when Voldemort returns, the color drains from the frame. The music cuts away, leaving only breathing and the faint rustle of robes. The look on Harry's face as he clutches Cedric's body is not that of a hero. It's the expression of a child who has just seen the end of childhood. Rowling writes, "He was shaking in every limb." But the film makes that shaking visceral. Radcliffe's expression is raw, almost blank, as if his mind cannot comprehend what his heart already knows. The innocence of the great hall ceiling is gone. What remains is the silence of loss. By the order of the Phoenix, Harry's transformation becomes emotional armor. His voice lowers, his movements sharpen. The filmmakers use lighting to show his evolution. The corridors are darker, the magic less colorful. The warmth of early Hogwarts replaced by grey-blue tones. When Harry stands in front of the Order, a grim old place, he no longer looks around with curiosity. His gaze is steady, almost guarded. The child who once asked questions now gives commands. "I must not tell lies," says the scar carved into his hand. But his eyes already tell the truth. He no longer believes the world is fair. This is where the visual power of cinema transcends the text. The books give us Harry's thoughts, the films let us feel the exhaustion beneath them. The moment that best encapsulates this visual maturity arrives in The Half-Blood Prince. In one haunting scene, Dumbledore drinks the cursed potion in the cave, collapsing into agony. The camera stays on Harry's face, trembling as he watches the man who once seemed immortal break down before him. The boy who once depended on Dumbledore for answers now has to be the one to act. The fear in his eyes turns into resolve. When Dumbledore whispers, "Kill me," and Harry refuses, we see it, the silent, irreversible passage into adulthood. Rowling writes, Harry felt as though an iron hand had closed around his heart. The film makes that feeling visible, as if the iron itself were in his throat. The light flickers over his face, half child, half man, caught between faith and reality. By the time the Deathly Hallows begins, Harry is no longer framed by warm light. His world has turned grey. The close-ups now reveal fine lines around his eyes, the faint tension in his jaw. He is no longer reacting to events, he is driving them. The tone of David Yates's direction reflects that shift. Handheld cameras follow Harry through forests and ruins, capturing exhaustion, dirt, and despair. In one quiet moment, when he digs Dobby's grave by hand, there is no music, no magic, only breathing, and the sound of the shovel striking earth. Rowling's book tells us, "Here lies Dobby, a free elf." The film lets us feel what that sentence means. This is not a wizard saving the world. This is a young man burying his friend with his bare hands, accepting that magic cannot fix everything. Number 16, Malfoy on the Tower. When the scene unfolds atop the astronomy tower in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, it is not merely a confrontation between Draco Malfoy and Albus Dumbledore. It becomes a moment of cinematic transcendence. The book by J.K. Rowling gives us a powerful exchange filled with hesitation and fear, yet the film adaptation transforms that quiet tension into something almost Shakespearean in its emotional gravity. As Draco stands before Dumbledore, his wand trembling, the moonlight spilling across his pale face, the audience is drawn into his paralysis. Every flicker of fear, every bead of sweat on his brow becomes a confession. This is not the arrogant boy who once sneered at Harry Potter on the Hogwarts Express. This is a child trapped in a war far beyond his understanding. In Rowling's text, Draco's inner conflict is hinted at through brief but sharp descriptions. He seemed to be fighting an internal battle. His face was wet and pale, his eyes wild. These words reveal that Draco is terrified, but the novel remains primarily inside Harry's perspective, limiting what we can feel from Draco himself. The reader witnesses him as an adversary consumed by fear, but not as a person drowning in guilt. The film, directed by David Yates, removes this limitation. Through Tom Felton's performance, Draco's fear becomes something physical, something that fills the entire space of the tower. The trembling of his wand, the shallow rhythm of his breath, and the unspoken pleading in his eyes all turn this moment into a haunting portrayal of human weakness. The scene's emotional depth in the film is built not only through acting but also through visual language. The cinematography isolates Draco and Dumbledore in an expanse of cold, grey-blue light, surrounded by wind and emptiness. The vast sky above them becomes a symbol of fate's indifference. Dumbledore stands calm and weary, while Draco appears on the edge of collapse. There is no safety, no escape, only the abyss below and the impossible choice before him. The quiet sound of the night amplifies the inner storm within Draco's mind, and when Nicholas Hooper's subdued score enters, it feels like the faint pulse of guilt itself echoing in the silence. In the book, Rowling keeps Dumbledore composed, almost gentle, when he speaks to Draco. He tells him, "Draco, Draco, you are not a killer." This line reveals everything about both characters, Dumbledore's compassion and Draco's fragility. But in the film, this exchange is not simply words, it becomes a moment of almost unbearable tension. Michael Gambon's Dumbledore stands unarmed, his expression filled with weary kindness, while Draco's face collapses under the weight of his choice. He wants to live up to his family's expectations, to the cruel task Voldemort has given him, but the film allows us to see the boy beneath the mask. His lips quiver, his wand lowers slightly, his breathing quickens, signs of someone on the brink of surrender. The visual intimacy makes the audience complicit in his suffering. The brilliance of the film lies in its restraint. There is no dramatic music when Draco hesitates, no sudden thunderclap or magical flare. Instead, the power of the scene emerges from stillness. The moonlight flickers across the tower stones, and Draco's face trembles in silence. His body language speaks louder than any dialogue. In this quietness, the audience can almost hear his heart pounding. The fear is not theatrical, it is painfully real. In that still frame, Draco Malfoy ceases to be a symbol of Slytherin arrogance and becomes a boy who has lost his way. Rowling's narrative gives us insight into Draco's circumstances, his parents' involvement with the Death Eaters, the unbearable pressure placed upon him by Voldemort, but the film shows what words alone cannot, the psychological breaking point of a child soldier. When Felton's Draco looks at Dumbledore, his eyes shimmer with tears that never fall, as though even crying would be too dangerous. The wand in his hand becomes not a weapon, but a burden. The scene encapsulates the tragedy of innocence corrupted, the price of growing up in a world divided by ideology and fear. The atmosphere surrounding them heightens the emotional intensity. The astronomy tower, high above the sleeping castle, becomes a stage of destiny. The soft hum of the wind through the stone arches, the dim glow of the stars, and the echo of Draco's labored breathing all merge into a symphony of despair. When Snape eventually appears, the tension reaches its breaking point. In the novel, Harry watches helplessly, hidden beneath the invisibility cloak, as events unfold. Rowling writes, "For the first time, Harry saw fear in Snape's eyes. Yet in the film, this moment carries an even greater power because of what comes before it. Draco's hesitation makes Snape's intervention not merely inevitable, but tragic. It is as if Snape steps in not only to fulfill Voldemort's orders, but also to spare Draco from a sin that would destroy him. The choice of camera angles intensifies this impression. Close-ups linger on Draco's face, showing every flicker of emotion, the twitch of his lips, the tightening of his jaw, the widening of his pupils. Each gesture betrays a storm of terror and shame. the film transforms him into a silent confession of guilt. Even the color palette, the cold blue of night contrasting with Dumbledore's faint, golden aura, tells the story of two worlds colliding, innocence and wisdom, fear and mercy, life and death. The scene's power lies in its contradictions. It is both intimate and vast, quiet yet thunderous in emotional impact. By the time Draco lowers his wand slightly, the viewer has already understood what Dumbledore has seen all along, that beneath the arrogance and cruelty lies a child who never chose this path. The book conveys this truth through dialogue. The film engraves it through imagery. When Dumbledore says softly, "You are not a killer," the words become almost sacred, as if they are trying to reach the boy's buried conscience. Draco's eyes flicker toward the sky, toward the freedom he cannot claim, and the audience senses his collapse not as weakness, but as a tragic victory of humanity over indoctrination. When Snape finally raises his wand, the audience is left breathless. The green flash that follows is not just a killing curse, it is the death of innocence. Draco's expression in that moment seals the tragedy. His relief and horror coexist. The camera does not cut away, instead it lingers on his face, illuminated by the fading light. This decision by the filmmakers forces us to stay with the pain, to witness the cost of survival. In that single image, the film captures what the book hints at but cannot fully show, the unbearable burden of guilt on a boy's shoulders. The emotional aftermath of the scene also gains strength from what follows. As Draco flees with Snape and the Death Eaters, his face is drained of all expression. He walks like a ghost, his victory hollow. In the book, Rowling describes him as pale and trembling, but the film goes further, allowing the silence and visual emptiness to communicate what words cannot. There is no triumph, no sense of accomplishment. The tower behind him, now a tomb, becomes a visual metaphor for the end of his childhood. The contrast between the boy who once mocked Harry for his bravery and the one who now carries the weight of a murder he did not commit is staggering. What makes this scene superior in the film is its complete surrender to emotion. The book is bound by perspective, by the limits of Harry's understanding. The film releases those limits and invites us into Draco's soul. The trembling hand, the flicker of tears, the stifled breath, all become the language of moral conflict. The audience is not told what Draco feels, they experience it. His silence becomes a scream, his hesitation a confession. By stripping away dialogue and relying on performance and atmosphere, the film achieves what literature rarely can, a wordless plea for forgiveness. The transformation of this moment from page to screen reveals the genius of cinematic storytelling. Rowling's writing gave birth to a complex character. The film gave him flesh, fear, and fragility. Draco's trembling wand, the wind around the tower, Dumbledore's calm voice, and the pale light of the moon weave together to create a scene that lingers long after the credits roll. It is not just about good and evil. It is about the unbearable cost of being human in a world that demands monsters. Every detail, from the subdued music to the desolate night sky, underscores the tragedy of choice. The audience leaves the scene not thinking of Dumbledore's death, but of Draco's silent collapse. The boy who could not kill becomes more memorable than the act itself. His moral paralysis turns him into one of the most human figures in the entire saga. Through this transformation, the film achieves what few adaptations do. It deepens our empathy. It teaches us that even within the walls of a fantasy world, true horror and beauty are born not from magic, but from the fragile heart of a frightened boy on a tower under the moon. Number 17. Snape's love for Lily. There is a moment in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 2, that transcends the boundaries between cinema and literature. It is the moment when we step into Severus Snape's memories and witness his lifelong love for Lily Evans. The book told us of it with restraint through Dumbledore's revelation and Harry's shock, yet the film, under David Yates's direction and through Alan Rickman's haunting performance, allowed us not only to understand but to feel. It captured something wordless, something that existed between silence, colour, and music. In those few minutes, Snape's story stopped being a subplot and became the beating heart of the entire saga. The sequence opens with a shattering intimacy. As the silvery threads of Snape's memories swirl in the pensieve, Harry plunges into them, and we follow. Suddenly we see a small boy, frail, dark-haired and lonely, hidden behind tall grass. He watches a girl laughing, sunlight glinting in her auburn hair. This boy is Snape. The girl is Lily. The camera lingers not on magic or spells, but on the simple purity of childhood wonder. Lily's laughter feels like a melody he will chase for the rest of his life. The book mentioned this scene briefly, stating that there was a girl sitting in the shade of a tree. Her long hair gleamed as she laughed. The words painted an image. The film breathed life into it. The tenderness of the lake scene between young Snape and Lily in the movie does not need dialogue to tell its truth. The audience understands immediately. This is not just friendship, it is devotion. The camera follows the curve of Lily's smile, the shy admiration in Snape's eyes, and the serenity of the water that reflects their innocence in J.K. Rowling's text, we see Snape trying to impress her with his magical knowledge, yet the written word cannot convey the aching vulnerability of a child who already knows he is different and who, perhaps for the first time, feels seen. The film shows that recognition, brief, bright, and tragic in retrospect. The years pass within seconds. The next glimpse is sharper, colder. Teenage Snape in Slytherin robes, standing apart while Lily walks with James Potter. The light in the scene fades, turning from warm gold to steely grey. No words are spoken, yet the emotional distance is immense. Rickman's performance later mirrors this shift. The grown man whose entire existence has become a long echo of that loss. The novel tells us that Snape called Lily a mudblood in anger, and that this marked the end of their friendship. The film does not need to restate it. It lets the image of Lily turning away do the work of 1,000 words. Silence becomes punishment, and the audience feels the unbearable weight of regret. Perhaps the most unforgettable moment comes when the older Snape cradles Lily's dead body in the ruined nursery of Godric's Hollow. It is a scene not described in the book at all. Rowling told us through Dumbledore's words that he loved her for nearly all of his life. But in the film, that love takes on a form that can wound. The image of Snape collapsing beside her, trembling, holding her as if he could will her back to life, transforms his character entirely. The camera lingers on his face, tears mixing with grief and guilt. It is wordless storytelling at its peak. The viewer realizes that every cruel remark, every harsh glance we have seen from him was born not from malice, but from endless mourning. Alan Rickman's subtlety defines this revelation. His voice, his stillness, the almost mechanical way he moves, as if every emotion is being forced through years of repression. All of it culminates in this scene. The music swells softly, composed by Alexandre Desplat, not to dramatize, but to accompany. The piano notes fall like rain. The lighting turns pale, almost heavenly, bathing Lily's hair in gold even as death surrounds her. It is poetry in motion. What the book allowed the mind to imagine, the film allowed the heart to absorb. Then comes the scene that changes everything. Dumbledore's study, the flashback of the conversation that reveals Snape's true mission. In the book, Dumbledore asks, "After all this time?" and Snape answers, "Always." It is a line that became immortal. Yet the film transforms it from a line of dialogue into a confession. The pause before Rickman speaks, the trembling breath, the way his eyes flicker toward the silver doe Patronus shimmering beside him. It is no longer mere loyalty. It is spiritual. The doe, identical to Lily's, floats like a fragment of his soul, a memory made light. For the first time, the audience feels that Snape's love transcended even life itself. Cinematically, the brilliance lies in what is not shown as much as what is. The editing weaves together moments, Lily's laughter, the Patronus, Snape's tears, like pages of a diary written in light. The book reveals this history in a single chapter, The Prince's Tale, with layers of dialogue and exposition. The movie condenses it into visual emotion. The contrast is profound. The literary Snape tells us his truth. The cinematic Snape lives it before our eyes. We do not learn about his heartbreak. We inhabit it. Rickman's Snape became more than the text ever described. His restrained movements, the guarded tone of his voice, the way his expression changes almost imperceptibly when Lily's name is spoken. All these choices created a character who is not only tragic, but achingly human. In the book, Snape is defined by mystery, sarcasm, and bitterness. In the film, those traits remain, but they gain context. Every act of cruelty becomes a disguise for devotion. Every command to "look at me" becomes a plea for understanding. The actor gives physical shape to emotional contradiction. Even the cinematography of the pensieve sequence reveals deeper meaning. The hues of green and silver, Slytherin's colors, dominate the frames, yet they are softened by golden light whenever Lily appears. The contrast becomes symbolic. Snape's world, cold and shadowed, pierced by the warmth of the only person who ever accepted him. The book describes events in chronological order, but the film arranges them like fragments of memory, disjointed, emotional, true to the way grief and love coexist in the mind. It is as if Snape's life itself is being replayed as a dream before fading into oblivion. There is also the extraordinary restraint in the direction. No melodrama, no swelling violins at the wrong time, no unnecessary flashiness. The emotion is raw because it is quiet. Rickman barely moves, the music barely rises. The viewer feels the pulse of emotion not through spectacle, but through empathy. When Harry later tells his son that Snape was the bravest man I ever knew, the film has already earned that statement. The book makes it believable. The movie makes it inevitable. What makes this scene superior to its literary version is not that it adds details, but that it transforms understanding. In the text, readers admire Snape's courage and tragic love from a respectful distance. In the movie, we are forced to confront it intimately. His devotion to Lily is not merely described, it becomes visible, tactile, real. When the adult Snape walks through the ruined corridor of Hogwarts after her death, his hand brushing the broken furniture, it is as if he walks through the ruins of his own soul. That single gesture speaks louder than paragraphs of internal reflection. The sequence also redefines our perception of love itself. It is not romantic in the traditional sense. Snape's love for Lily is unfulfilled, selfless, and eternal. The book states that he had never stopped loving her, even after all those years. The movie visualizes that devotion as something sacred. His love becomes his punishment and his redemption. Each tear he sheds feels like penance. Each quiet glance toward the memory of her is a prayer. Through Rickman's performance, Snape becomes a tragic saint of unrequited love, a man who carried his sin and his grace in equal measure. The use of visual metaphors heightens the power of this adaptation. The white petals falling as Lily laughs in childhood mirror the silver tears that slide down Snape's face in adulthood. The lake that once reflected the light of their youth becomes an echo of the reflective pensive, where those memories now reside. Water, reflection, memory, they intertwine to symbolize love preserved beyond death. Such cinematic poetry cannot be replicated in text. It requires movement, music, and human presence. Even the transition from memory to reality in the film is telling. When the scene ends and Harry rises from the pensive, the world looks different. The audience feels as if they too have lived another life, Snape's life. That transformation of perspective is the triumph of cinema. The book reveals information, the movie reveals emotion. Both are masterpieces in their own forms, yet the film achieves something singular. It redeems Snape not by explanation, but by empathy. By the time the scene fades, viewers no longer see Severus Snape as the bitter, cruel teacher of earlier films. They see the man behind the mask, the boy in the grass, the lover by the lake, the mourner in the nursery. Every layer of his cold exterior melts away, leaving behind a soul consumed by one feeling that never died. The book gave us the truth. The film made us feel it. Through Alan Rickman's artistry, the story of Snape and Lily became not only the emotional climax of Harry Potter, but one of the most unforgettable portraits of love in modern cinema. Number 18, Harry at the Graveyard. It begins with the shimmer of a portkey and the echo of a cheer that dies too soon. In both the book Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire and its film adaptation, the Triwizard Tournament ends in triumph turned to terror, but the screen captures something the page could only suggest. When Harry and Cedric Diggory grasp the cup together, they are transported not to glory but to a graveyard. In J.K. Rowling's novel, the transition is described as a jerk behind the navel, a familiar sensation of magical travel. Yet on screen, director Mike Newell transforms that simple movement into dread. The world stretches, colors bleed, and then silence. What follows is not merely a turning point in the story, but a transformation of the entire tone of the series. Childhood, adventure, and the warmth of Hogwarts collapse into a nightmarish vision of death and rebirth. The camera moves slowly through the fog. The graveyard of Little Hangleton is bathed in a cold blue light, the kind of light that drains colour from life itself. The mist clings to the tombstones, swallowing everything in uncertainty. There is a stillness so complete that even the rustle of leaves seems intrusive. And this is not the playful world of moving staircases or Quidditch cheers. This is a place of finality where laughter has no echo. In the book, Rowling writes that Harry felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up, but the visual expression of that fear is far more tangible. The audience feels the weight of the place, its history of evil before a word is spoken. The air itself seems to wait for something terrible to begin. Cedric's death comes swiftly, so swiftly that even memory struggles to catch it. In the book, Peter Pettigrew's curse is delivered with clinical brevity. A jet of green light shot from the wand, and Cedric Diggory was lying on the ground, eyes wide open, dead. It's shocking in its simplicity, but the film heightens it into horror. The spell flashes across the darkness and the world stops. The music cuts out. The thud of Cedric's body hitting the earth is a sound that seems to echo forever. Harry's reaction, his desperate, choked cry of "No!" isn't heroic. It's human. It's a boy watching another boy die for no reason at all. Daniel Radcliffe's face, frozen in disbelief and grief, becomes the mirror for the audience's own paralysis. The moment refuses comfort. It doesn't dramatize death, it exposes it. Bound by the coils of the stone angel, Harry's helplessness becomes the film's emotional center. The statue looms behind him like a grotesque parody of protection. Its wings are spread, not to shelter, but to imprison. The stone hand clutches Harry's arm, pressing him into the earth as though the grave itself wants to claim him. In the book, Rowling describes how ropes bound him tightly to the headstone, but seeing it brings a new kind of terror. The camera circles him, showing his panic, his breath clouding in the cold night air. Every movement of his eyes reveals his disbelief, that this is real, that Cedric is gone, that he might be next. The story, once about magical challenges, now becomes about survival against forces that have no mercy. The arrival of Wormtail with the small, ugly bundle, Voldemort's temporary form, is filmed with the precision of a nightmare. The creature's shrill breathing and Pettigrew's trembling hands carry a physical disgust that the book only hints at. Rowling writes that the thing was like a child's body, only thinner, raw, and scaly. But on screen it becomes a perversion of life itself. The audience recoils even before it speaks. The cauldron's contents bubble and hiss, the green light illuminating Wormtail's face in twisted devotion. When he cuts his hand and drops it into the potion, it isn't just pain, it's ritual. The camera doesn't flinch. The red of blood, the blue of fire, the grey of stone, all converge into a palette of death. Voldemort's rebirth is perhaps the most chilling resurrection ever filmed in a fantasy movie. Ralph Fiennes emerges from steam and darkness, hairless and pale as marble, his eyes two slits of serpent red. The sound design strips away all warmth, even his breathing sounds unnatural. In the novel, the Dark Lord rises tall and skeletally thin, but seeing it is different. It's the embodiment of cold intelligence and inhuman will. His first command, "Robe me," delivered in that whispering, sibilant voice, freezes the audience before any act of violence. It's not shouted, it's spoken as if he expects obedience from the world itself. The film's Voldemort doesn't need power demonstrated, his existence is power. The Death Eater's arrival transforms the scene into a dark ceremony. Their masks gleam under the pale moonlight, their movements mechanical, almost insect-like. The camera glides among them, showing their fearful reverence. In the book, Rowling lists the names Malfoy, Crabbe, Goyle, but the film understands that anonymity is more frightening. The hoods conceal identities, turning them into symbols of corruption. The circle they form is not just a gathering, it's a trap, with Harry at its center. Every visual choice underscores isolation. The audience can almost feel the chill spreading outward, as if Voldemort's presence corrupts the air itself. When Voldemort approaches Harry, the tone shifts from spectacle to intimacy. He studies the boy with curiosity, like a scientist examining a specimen. "The boy who lived," he whispers, each word slow and deliberate. The camera holds on Harry's face, his tears mixing with sweat and dirt. The book gives us Harry's thoughts, his determination, his fear, but the film replaces inner monologue with silence. It trusts the visual to convey what language cannot. The trembling of his lips, the widening of his pupils. These small movements become expressions of trauma that no description could equal. It is not courage we see, but endurance. The duel that follows is unlike any wizard battle before it. There is no quick exchange of spells, no graceful choreography. It's raw and desperate. When Voldemort forces Harry to bow, the scene feels like an execution. The green and red lights of the curses illuminate the graveyard in a haunting rhythm, like flashes of lightning revealing death's theatre. Rowling's prose captures the event as a golden beam connecting the two wands, but the film extends it into agony. Sparks shower around them, the energy tearing at the ground, and Harry's face contorts not with triumph, but with pain. The tension is almost unbearable, and when the priori incantatem begins, it feels like a rupture in reality. The spirits that emerge from Voldemort's wand, his victims, are ghosts made of light, shimmering in sorrow. The film shows James and Lily Potter, Cedric, and others surrounding Harry in an ethereal glow. Their presence is not comforting, it's tragic. They speak without sound, their faces filled with both pride and grief. In the book, Lily's voice is calm. When the connection is broken, we will linger for only moments. But the visual of her reaching toward her son, fading even as she gives him courage, is beyond words. The audience knows that Harry's victory, if it comes, will be hollow. He has already lost too much. When the spell breaks and Harry runs to Cedric's body, the music returns for the first time in what feels like hours. The notes are soft, mournful, almost sacred. He clutches Cedric's hand, whispering that they must take him back. There is no triumph, no relief. The return to Hogwarts happens in a burst of light, but the silence that greets them is unbearable. In the book, Rowling writes, he was clutching Cedric's body, trying to lift it, trying to bring it back to life. The film shows this struggle with such realism that it transcends the fantasy. The boy who once flew on a broomstick now kneels beside death, powerless. The applause that greets their return dies the instant people realize what they see. Harry's face is blank, drained of emotion, his eyes fixed somewhere beyond understanding. The crowd's gasps, the screams of Cedric's father, and Dumbledore's desperate attempts to reach him all fade into a blur. This contrast, the noise of life against the stillness of death, cements the horror. It's the moment when the audience understands that this world, no matter how magical, is no longer safe. Childhood has ended not with a lesson, but with a scream. Cedric's death marks the true loss of innocence for both Harry and the viewers. Until this moment, every danger in the series had been shadowed by safety, a teacher to guide, a spell to protect, a miracle to undo the harm. But now, nothing can undo what happened. The book captures this with quiet understatement, describing how Harry felt as though he were watching from outside his own body. The film turns that detachment into visible shock. His trembling hands, his unfocused stare, these are the marks of trauma that linger long after the credits roll. It's no longer a story about bravery, it's a story about survival. The horror of the graveyard scene is not only in what is shown, but in what it signifies. Voldemort's return isn't a fantasy climax, it's a prophecy fulfilled. The world that Harry knew, where right always triumphed and evil was vanquished by courage, crumbles before the audience's eyes. The fog, the stillness, the slow pacing all serve to stretch time, making each second feel eternal. It's as though death itself has become a character, present in every frame. The book gives the event narrative clarity, the film gives it soul-chilling immediacy. Viewers don't just witness evil's return, they feel its breath on their necks. By the end of the sequence, nothing remains of the whimsical tale that began in a cupboard under the stairs. The graveyard scene redefines the series, drawing a line between childhood wonder and adult fear. Rowling's words planted the seeds, but Cinema made them bloom into terror. Harry's desperate cry, the emptiness of the night, and the pale light of resurrection come together in an image that haunts long after the story ends. It is the moment when magic ceases to be a dream and becomes the instrument of horror. In that graveyard, the boy who lived learns what it means to live through death. Number 19. Bellatrix versus Molly. When the Battle of Hogwarts erupts in chaos, spells flying and walls trembling, one moment seizes the heart of the audience more powerfully than almost any other: the duel between Molly Weasley and Bellatrix Lestrange. On the page, this clash is quick, almost abrupt, a flash of motherly rage that ends in victory before readers have time to fully feel its weight. But in the film, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, that same encounter becomes a thunderclap of emotion, a crescendo of everything the saga has built toward. The adaptation magnifies it, slows it down, and lets the audience watch love itself rise up against madness. In J.K. Rowling's book, the scene is only a few lines long. As Bellatrix taunts Ginny Weasley during the battle, Molly charges at her, screaming words that have since become legendary. "Not my daughter, you bitch!" The text describes their duel as fierce, but within moments Bellatrix falls. Rowling's narration moves quickly, the way a battlefield demands speed. It is a mother's instinct written in ink, but it leaves much to imagination. Readers understand Molly's power, her protective fury, yet the brevity makes the fight a punctuation mark in a storm of larger events. The film, directed by David Yates, transforms that brief spark into a roaring fire. The camera isolates the two women amid the collapsing Great Hall, framing their duel like a personal reckoning. Helena Bonham Carter's Bellatrix moves with deranged grace, her laughter sharp and unpredictable, while Julie Walters' Molly becomes the embodiment of maternal wrath. Every flick of the wand feels personal, every burst of light echoes the years of pain and loss the Weasley family has endured. The filmmakers understand that this confrontation is not just about spells, it is about everything Bellatrix represents: cruelty, arrogance, and the mockery of innocence, colliding with everything Molly embodies: warmth, loyalty, and unconditional love. The movie lingers on the tension. Bellatrix, ever the sadist, circles her opponent like a predator, her smirk dripping with disdain. She has killed before Sirius Black, Dobby, countless others, and she toys with Molly as though she is certain of victory. But the audience already senses the shift. This is not the timid homemaker who frets over her children's socks and sandwiches. This is a mother lion defending her cubs. Walter's performance captures something ancient and primal, her expression a mixture of fear, fury, and devotion. The words, "Not my daughter, you bitch," erupt not as dialogue but as a battle cry, an incantation of love turned to fire. Rowling's line becomes iconic in the film because of the context the camera provides. The roar of the collapsing castle fades away for a moment, and all that exists are two figures, one draped in madness, the other cloaked in courage. When Molly strikes, the spell feels earned. For 7 films, she has been the tender heart of the story, the one who offers Harry a home when he has none. To see her now standing as the final defense against one of Voldemort's deadliest followers gives the audience a cathartic release. It is justice wrapped in maternal instinct. In the book, Bellatrix's death happens between sentences. Molly's curse soared beneath Bellatrix's outstretched arm and hit her squarely in the chest. Bellatrix's gloating smile froze. Her eyes seemed to bulge. For a split second she knew what had happened, and then she toppled, and the watching crowd roared. It's fast, efficient, and vivid, but cinematic energy cannot thrive in such brevity. The film stretches that second into an eternity. Sparks collide mid-air, light flares between them, and Bellatrix's laughter turns to disbelief. It's a duel of forces as symbolic as any myth: madness versus mercy, hatred versus love. Helena Bonham Carter plays Bellatrix as the mirror image of Molly, a woman consumed by passion but twisted by cruelty. She is the dark reflection of what love becomes when it is poisoned by obsession. Bellatrix's devotion to Voldemort is as fierce as Molly's love for her family, but one is self-destructive, the other redemptive. The contrast makes their fight almost spiritual. When Bellatrix disintegrates into ash, it's not only a villain's end, but an exorcism of the fear and pain she has inflicted. The visual effect, the explosion of dust and light, suggests not a simple death, but the cleansing of something unholy. The moment is more than spectacle, it is storytelling through emotion. The audience has watched Molly for years as a symbol of warmth, her kitchen a safe haven amid darkness, her sweaters, her scolding, her tears, all the small gestures of motherhood have accumulated quietly in the background of the saga. When she finally stands alone against Bellatrix, all those years of nurturing transform into strength. It is the culmination of an ordinary woman becoming extraordinary through love. The filmmakers give her the space to embody that transformation fully. In contrast, the book's pacing prevents such expansion. Rowling's words are powerful, but her narrative in that chapter races toward the final confrontation with Voldemort. There is no room for lingering emotion. The duel reads like a flash in the chaos, significant but swallowed by the urgency of the climax. The film, however, rearranges time itself to let the audience breathe, to feel the gravity of what is happening. When Bellatrix explodes into nothingness, the silence that follows carries more weight than pages of description could. Julie Walters' portrayal also adds layers of humanity that text alone can't deliver. Her eyes, filled with grief for Fred's death, hold a rage that is both sacred and sorrowful. She doesn't fight for vengeance, she fights to protect what remains of her family. That distinction is crucial. In that instant, Molly becomes the heart of the entire resistance. The war is no longer about politics or prophecy. It's about a mother's refusal to let evil take one more child. Bellatrix, by contrast, embodies everything that perverts love. Her adoration of Voldemort is fanatical, devoid of self or mercy. The book hints at this pathology, but Helena Bonham Carter's performance gives it a frightening beauty. Her wild eyes, her ecstatic laughter as she duels, make her seem almost delighted by her own destruction. She dances with death, believing herself untouchable, until Molly's curse ends the illusion. That visual of Bellatrix dissolving, laughter cut short, lingers far longer than a sentence on paper could. This cinematic reinterpretation also elevates the theme of feminine power that runs quietly through the entire series. The women of Harry Potter, from Lily Potter to Hermione Granger, are often the moral anchors of the story. But in this final battle, it is Molly, the mother and homemaker, who becomes the unexpected warrior. She does not wield her wand for glory, but for love. The camera doesn't romanticize her. It makes her real, sweating, trembling, but unyielding. In that authenticity lies her triumph. What the film achieves is emotional clarity. The scene captures the essence of Rowling's message, that love in its purest form is the greatest magic of all. By expanding the duel, the filmmakers let the audience see that truth rather than merely read it. Every spark of light between the two women becomes symbolic, a literal illumination of the power of affection over fanaticism. It is not Dumbledore's wisdom or Harry's courage that ends Bellatrix's reign of terror, but a mother's love. In visual storytelling, timing is emotion. The few seconds that the movie dedicates to Molly's victory allow the audience to absorb what it means. The roar of battle quiets, the world seems to pause, then Bellatrix crumbles and Molly stands breathless. There is no triumphal music, only the release of tension built over 8 films. The simplicity of that aftermath, the quiet defiance in Molly's stance, communicates what no line of dialogue could, that heroism often wears the face of an ordinary woman who refuses to yield. When one returns to the book after watching the film, it becomes clear that Rowling laid the foundation, but the screen breathed life into it. The written duel is an idea, a flash of courage. The filmed version is experience, a moment that makes the viewer's heart race. The transformation from text to image gives the story its full emotional resonance. It's not that the film corrects the book, it completes it. It turns a mother's shout into a legend. Thus, in The Deathly Hallows Part 2, that confrontation between Molly and Bellatrix stands as one of the rare instances where adaptation surpasses its source. The film takes a fleeting paragraph and forges from it a testament to human love. It is the heartbeat of the battle, the climax of years of quiet strength finally unleashed. On the page, Molly Weasley kills a Death Eater. On the screen, she conquers darkness itself. And that, perhaps, is the truest kind of magic. Number 20, The First Flight on a Broom. When the first film of the Harry Potter saga, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or Philosopher's Stone as it is known in the United Kingdom, was released in 2001, audiences around the world were introduced not only to the boy who lived, but also to a visual language of magic that would define an entire generation. Among the many moments that transformed J.K. Rowling's words into something tangible and breathtaking, one scene rose above all others. Harry's first flight on a broomstick. It was the moment when literature's imagination became cinema's sensation, a sequence that seemed to pull every viewer into the air alongside him. What Rowling had described in a few vivid sentences, director Chris Columbus and his team translated into pure, soaring magic. In the book, the moment is quietly powerful. After all, the first flying lesson is not meant to be anything extraordinary. It is merely a school exercise for first-year students. But Rowling's text gives subtle hints that this is no ordinary lesson for Harry. When Neville Longbottom's broom misbehaves and the boy ends up breaking his wrist, Madam Hooch orders everyone to stay grounded. Yet Harry, seeing Draco Malfoy steal Neville's remembrall, acts on instinct. "Give it here, Malfoy!" he shouts, grabbing the broom and kicking off from the ground. Rowling describes it with a simple, elegant rhythm, and then without thinking, without planning it, without worrying about falling off, he shot straight into the air. And it was better than he'd ever imagined. The words are thrilling, but restrained. We know that Harry is flying. We understand that it feels natural to him. But the book relies on the reader's imagination to fill in the sensation of speed, the rush of air, and the dizzying joy of flight. The film, however, refuses to leave anything to the imagination. From the instant the young Daniel Radcliffe grips the handle of his broom, something electric happens. The soundtrack by John Williams swells with wonder, but then quiets, letting the sound of rushing wind and Harry's own laughter take over. His robe flutters, his hair whips in the air, and the sunlight glints across the Hogwarts courtyard. The camera doesn't just show him rising, it ascends with him, circling, tilting, gliding. Suddenly, you are no longer watching Harry fly. You are flying with him. Every movement of the camera is choreographed to mimic the physical thrill of a first flight, and it becomes impossible not to smile as wide as he does. This transformation from text to image demonstrates one of cinema's most powerful abilities: to make emotion visible. On the page, Rowling's sentence, "It was better than he'd ever imagined," tells us what Harry feels, but in the film, we see it. Daniel Radcliffe's eyes widen in genuine awe, his mouth opens in a gasp that quickly turns into laughter, and that expression of unfiltered joy becomes the heart of the scene. For a moment, the viewer is no longer an observer of magic, but a participant in it. This was not only Harry's discovery of his gift, it was every child's secret wish made real. The setting itself adds to the magic. The courtyard of Hogwarts is bathed in warm autumn light, and the sky is an impossible shade of blue. As Harry rises above the stone towers, the world below becomes smaller, safer, almost like a toy version of reality. The camera captures this shift in perspective beautifully. The higher he goes, the freer he feels. There is no fear, no hesitation, only the exhilaration of discovering that he belongs somewhere beyond the ground. That visual metaphor is something the film captures more vividly than words ever could. It is the cinematic embodiment of freedom, of breaking the invisible limits that keep ordinary people earthbound. In the book, Professor McGonagall's appearance and the subsequent revelation that Harry is a natural-born seeker for Gryffindor's Quidditch team are important narrative moments. They confirm that his flying talent is not just luck, but destiny. Yet the film manages to make this moment of discovery less about prophecy and more about pure human emotion. When McGonagall later tells him that his father, James Potter, was also a seeker, it feels less like foreshadowing and more like a whisper from the past, a reminder that Harry's joy in flying is a connection to his parents, to a life he never knew, but somehow carries within him. That layer of emotional depth is something the visual language of film enhances effortlessly. The sound design of this scene plays a crucial role in making it unforgettable. The rush of the wind is not constant but dynamic. It rises and falls as Harry climbs and dives. The music fades just enough to let those natural sounds breathe, emphasizing the realism of the moment. When Harry levels out and steadies the broom, there's a fleeting silence before he breaks into laughter. It's a small detail, yet it gives the audience space to breathe, to feel the same pause of awe he experiences. That rhythm between sound and silence is something literature cannot replicate. It's uniquely cinematic, a sensory bridge between viewer and character. There's also a subtle shift in tone that makes the film version so effective. In the book, Harry's defiance of Madame Hooch's orders creates tension. He's doing something reckless, and we know there could be consequences, but in the film, the emotional focus moves away from the rule-breaking and toward the liberation he feels. The tension exists, but it's background noise to the soaring exhilaration. That artistic choice changes the meaning of the scene. It's not about rebellion, but about discovery. Harry is not simply disobeying, he is awakening to who he truly is. Cinematographer John Seale captures the sensation of weightlessness with remarkable care. The camera does not jerk or tremble. It glides with a grace that mirrors the stability of Harry's flight. Wide shots show the vastness of the sky, while close-ups capture the thrill in his expression. The balance between intimacy and spectacle gives the viewer both emotional and physical immersion. It's a delicate dance between what is seen and what is felt, a dance that only film can choreograph. Every detail, from the angle of the sunlight to the movement of the leaves below, contributes to the illusion that this world exists beyond special effects. And that is the true success of the scene. It feels real. The broom looks solid, the wind looks cold, and the sunlight feels warm. Even now, over 2 decades later, the sequence hasn't lost its magic. Viewers still believe, for those few minutes, that broomsticks could actually fly. The visual storytelling also captures something essential about Harry's character. On the ground, he is unsure, often overshadowed by others, But the moment he rises into the air, his awkwardness vanishes. He is confident, instinctive, and at peace. This contrast is not explicitly stated in the book. It is felt through Rowling's tone and choice of words. But the film crystallizes it visually, through movement, expression, and light. We watch a boy who has spent his life in a cupboard beneath the stairs suddenly discover that the sky belongs to him. One of the most touching aspects of this cinematic moment is its universality. It doesn't rely on deep knowledge of the wizarding world or Quidditch rules. You don't need to understand spells or broom models to feel its beauty. Anyone who has ever dreamed of flying, who has ever longed for escape, recognizes the emotion instantly. It's that primal human desire for freedom, for transcendence, that turns a simple scene into a timeless one. Children in the audience gripped their seats, adults smiled unconsciously, and for a heartbeat, everyone in the theatre believed in magic. The moment also set the emotional tone for the entire film series. Every future flight, whether during a Quidditch match, a daring escape, or a battle against dark forces, traces its emotional roots back to this first ascent. It is the origin of Harry's courage, his trust in himself, and his belief that some forces, hope, instinct, love, are stronger than fear. This foundational idea would echo through every subsequent film, but it began here, with a boy, a broom, and the endless sky. It is often said that reading allows the imagination to fly further than any film can. Yet this particular moment in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone stands as an exception. The visual language doesn't limit imagination, it amplifies it. Rowling gave us the blueprint. Columbus, Seal, and Radcliffe gave it wings. Together they created not just a scene, but an emotional experience that transcends medium. Even those who know every line of the book by heart find themselves breathless when watching Harry soar for the first time. Rewatching it today, the scene still holds that same charm. The technology may show its age, but the feeling it evokes remains untouchable. It's not the realism of the effects that matters, it's the sincerity of the moment. Harry's smile, the sunlight, the laughter carried by the wind, they remind us of something we all once felt as children, the belief that the world was full of impossible possibilities. And when the broom lifts off, that belief returns as fresh as it was the first time. In that flight, the film captures something deeper than fantasy. It captures the exact instant when a lonely boy begins to believe he might belong in the world after all. The book gives us the words, the movie gives us the wings, and for every viewer who ever dreamed of seeing Hogwarts, of touching the sky, or of hearing the whisper of wind against their face, that first flight remains the purest magic of all. Number 21, the bridge explosion. The destruction of the Millennium Bridge in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Part 1 is one of those cinematic inventions that transcends the source material. It was never written by J.K. Rowling, yet it feels as though it should have been. The moment captures something essential, the creeping terror of Voldemort's world spilling into the ordinary, a symbolic explosion of the fragile line that once separated wizards from muggles. In the film, the scene unfolds with no words, only the trembling cables of the bridge and the distant shrieks of Londoners. The dark clouds gather, and then, like a wound opening in the heart of the city, the bridge collapses into the Thames. It is not just a spectacle of destruction, it is the birth cry of the new world Voldemort has promised. In the book, the opening of the Deathly Hallows is quieter, more intimate. It begins with the words, "The two men appeared out of nowhere, a few yards apart in the narrow moonlit lane." The scene sets a tone of secrecy, the whispering evil of a meeting between Severus Snape and Yaxley. Rowling tells us that the Muggle Prime Minister has been informed of recent events, and she briefly mentions that the Brockdale Bridge disaster had been attributed to the collapse of poorly maintained supports. That is all. A few lines of newsprint, a passing illusion. The wizarding world is tightening its grip on the Muggle One, but the reader does not see it, they are told. The menace is abstract, distant, as if evil still moves in the shadows. The film refuses that distance. It brings the terror into daylight. Director David Yates understood that cinema thrives on the visible, the tangible. The image of the bridge cracking apart in the middle of London, people running, lights flickering, metal tearing. It does what a page cannot. It transforms an idea into an emotion. In that instant, Voldemort ceases to be a mythic figure hiding in the background. He becomes a terrorist, an enemy who attacks cities and murders innocents in public. The sequence gives us a language of fear that belongs not just to Hogwarts but to the world we know. It is London's 9/11 moment, a reminder that no one is untouchable anymore. The camera moves with brutal grace. The Death Eaters, black smoke swirling behind them, sweep across the sky, their flight a streak of darkness against the sunset. Beneath them, the bridge sways, its suspension cables groaning under invisible pressure. The audience sees the faces of ordinary people, a man clutching his briefcase, a woman holding her child, just before the pavement splits apart. It's a moment of helplessness, and that helplessness is what makes it unforgettable. In that sequence, the magical war becomes everyone's war. This novel works differently. Her strength lies in psychology, in the small human details of fear. When she writes about Voldemort's rise, it happens through whispers, through the shifting loyalties of characters like Snape, through the uncertainty of the Ministry. The destruction of the bridge, as she describes it indirectly, feels like something happening offstage. That subtlety is part of her craft. She wants readers to feel that the Muggle world is unaware of the apocalypse brewing beside it. Yet cinema cannot whisper. It must show. The filmmakers translate her unseen threat into a visual wound upon London itself. When the bridge collapses, the sound design does half the storytelling. The grinding metal, the rush of the wind, the silence that follows the screams. It's all orchestrated to make the viewer's heart race. There is no need for exposition or dialogue. The scene communicates pure dread. We understand without words that Voldemort's army has crossed a line. In that moment, the Death Eaters are not merely assassins of wizards, they are destroyers of worlds. The artistry of this edition lies in how it expands the emotional landscape of the story. The Harry Potter books have always hinted at the danger Voldemort poses to Muggles, but the films, particularly from The Half-Blood Prince onward, turn that danger into spectacle. In The Half-Blood Prince we saw a similar bridge sequence, also an invention, where Death Eaters attack the Millennium Bridge as a foreshadowing of things to come. The repetition in the Deathly Hallows opening cements the idea. Voldemort's darkness is now routine, his reach absolute. There is a cold realism in how the filmmakers portray the attack. The Death Eaters move like storm clouds, their magic is industrial and cruel, and the bridge, a symbol of human progress and connection, becomes the target. Bridges are metaphors in themselves. They link worlds, unite people, overcome divides. To destroy one is to destroy hope. The image of the Millennium Bridge crumbling into the water thus becomes an unspoken declaration that the bridge between the magical and the mundane has been severed forever. For all her brilliance, Rowling never allowed herself this kind of blunt imagery. Her narrative remains anchored to Harry's perspective, and Harry is not in London when the war begins. The book's opening chapters are devoted to the preparations for his escape from Privet Drive and to the heavy sense of inevitability surrounding Dumbledore's death. But the film, liberated from that constraint, opens the curtain wider. It allows us to witness what Harry cannot see: the suffering of ordinary people, the real-world cost of the wizarding conflict. It gives the audience a front-row seat to the chaos that until now lived only in headlines and ministry reports. There is also a symbolic richness in how this cinematic moment parallels the themes of the entire saga. The bridge, as an emblem of connection, mirrors the relationships that Voldemort seeks to destroy. He wants isolation, wizards against muggles, purebloods against half-bloods, fear against compassion. When the bridge collapses, it visually expresses that ideology. It's not just London falling apart, it's the human world tearing at its own seams. The film captures in 5 seconds what takes chapters of political tension to express in prose. The visual motif of falling, too, is significant. Throughout the Harry Potter series, falling often marks transformation. Dumbledore's fall from the astronomy tower, Harry's plunge into the lake to retrieve the sword, the descent into the Chamber of Secrets. Each fall represents a passage from innocence to knowledge, from safety to danger. The fall of the bridge belongs to that tradition. It signals that the world itself has fallen, that there is no going back to safety or childhood. What makes the bridge scene superior to its literary equivalent is not just its spectacle, but its emotional immediacy. Rowling's prose can evoke terror, but it leaves room for the imagination. The film fills that room with sound and motion. The audience doesn't imagine the fear, and they feel it. They feel the vibration of collapsing steel, the sudden rush of air as the bridge breaks apart. It's a shared experience of horror, communal and visceral. That's what cinema does best. The decision to add this moment also reveals something about adaptation itself. Great adaptations are not slaves to their texts, they interpret them. In showing us the bridge's destruction, the filmmakers are interpreting Rowling's subtext, that Voldemort's war is not confined to the shadows, that his evil is total. The scene transforms an offhand mention into a thesis statement. Evil, it tells us, does not stay contained. It crosses borders, bridges, and worlds. Visually, the sequence also sets the tone for the rest of the film. The Deathly Hallows. Part 1 is a story about displacement. Characters on the run, worlds collapsing, safety turning to dust. The opening attack on London becomes the first note in that symphony of instability. The film never lets the viewer breathe easily after that. From the destruction of the bridge to the empty ministry corridors to the quiet deaths in forests and fields, every frame hums with the same tension first unleashed above the Thames. It's interesting to imagine what the book might have felt like had Rowling lingered longer on that Brockdale Bridge disaster. But perhaps it is precisely her restraint that made the cinematic edition so powerful. The novel leaves space, and the film fills it. Together they form 2 halves of one idea, unseen evil and its visible consequence. The film's explosion gives voice to the silence between Rowling's lines. When the bridge finally sinks, there is no hero to stop it, no wand raised against the darkness. The screen cuts to black. It's a moment of surrender, the world yielding to chaos. And in that void, the audience senses what Harry will soon discover, that the war has already begun, and that it will touch every soul, magical or not. The bridge that once shimmered across the Thames is gone, and with it, the illusion of safety. What remains is the echo of collapsing metal, a reminder that evil rarely announces itself in words. It arrives in the roar of destruction, in the terror of the ordinary made extraordinary. And that is why the film's moment, the explosion of the Millennium Bridge, stands as one of the few times when cinema, with all its visual language and raw immediacy, surpasses the book. It turns metaphor into memory, imagination into experience, and fear into something we can see, hear, and never forget. Number 22. Harry and Hermione's dance. There are rare moments in film when an invented scene captures the soul of the story more vividly than the original text. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, there is one such moment, the quiet, unexpected dance between Harry Potter and Hermione Granger. It lasts barely a few minutes, yet it conveys what pages of dialogue could not. The war has begun, Ron Weasley has left in anger and despair, and Harry and Hermione are left alone in the cold stillness of a tent, burdened by silence and fear. In that fragile pause between battles, Harry reaches out to the only friend still beside him. The result is a scene that, while absent from J.K. Rowling's book, feels so deeply true to her world that it transcends adaptation. The setting could not be more somber. The two young fugitives have just moved their tent after Ron's departure. The radio murmurs lists of the missing and the dead, names that could be their classmates, their parents, or perhaps their own in the near future. Hermione sits withdrawn, wrapped in grief, her hope dimming like the light outside. The book describes her after Ron's exit as very quiet, rarely speaking and moving as though she carried an invisible weight. In the film, director David Yates chose to fill that silence not with another argument, but with something infinitely more fragile. A dance. It is Harry's wordless attempt to chase away despair. He switches on a tinny tune from the radio, Nick Cave's "O Children," and extends his hand. Hermione hesitates, and then, for the first time in a long while, she smiles. There is something profoundly human in that gesture. It is not the dance of lovers, nor of victors. It is the dance of two people clinging to the remnants of joy when everything else is gone. The camera does not intrude. It moves gently around them, as if afraid to break the spell. Their feet shuffle awkwardly on the worn carpet. Their smiles are uncertain, but real. For a brief moment, Harry and Hermione are no longer soldiers, or heroes, or chosen ones. They are simply friends who remember what it feels like to be alive. The music carries them into a fleeting world where there is no war, no Horcruxes, no Voldemort, only warmth, laughter, and the heartbeat of human connection. The beauty of this moment lies in its subtlety. Nowhere in Rowling's books do Harry and Hermione share a romantic bond, despite years of fan debates and speculation. Rowling herself once said that their relationship is based on loyalty and understanding rather than attraction. The film's dance honors that truth while deepening it. There is intimacy here, but it is not about desire, it is about solace. It is the embrace one gives not to a partner, but to a friend when words no longer help. In the dim light, the boundaries of friendship and family blur, and the audience sees what love can mean in its purest form. Not possession, but presence. What makes the scene remarkable is its silence. In a story filled with spells, speeches, and battles, this moment is almost painfully quiet. It does not need dialogue to speak volumes. When the music fades, Hermione's brief smile vanishes too, and reality returns. Ron is gone, and the war still rages. But for that heartbeat of time, both characters found refuge. The scene becomes a metaphor for hope the courage to reach for light even when surrounded by darkness. It is reminiscent of Dumbledore's words from The Prisoner of Azkaban. Happiness can be found even in the darkest of times if one only remembers to turn on the light. Here, Harry quite literally turns on that light through a simple song and the offer of a dance. In the book, this part of the story unfolds very differently. Rowling writes that after Ron's departure, Hermione cried for a week. She refused to speak to Harry except to pass on information. The atmosphere is heavy and suffocating, a picture of loss and frustration. It is powerful on the page, but the visual medium demanded a different rhythm, something that could show both despair and resilience without words. David Yates and screenwriter Steve Kloves understood that cinema allows emotions to be seen, not merely described. By inventing the dance, they gave physical shape to the fragile emotional thread that still binds the characters together. The actors themselves carry this scene with extraordinary grace. Daniel Radcliffe's Harry, usually awkward with emotions, suddenly reveals an instinctive tenderness. His smile is small, almost embarrassed, but it carries warmth. Emma Watson's Hermione moves hesitantly at first, her grief still visible in her eyes, until the music lifts her ever so slightly. The chemistry between them, long established over years of collaboration, shines with authenticity. They look in that moment like two real people, tired, lonely, and trying to remember who they are beyond the fight. The camera lingers on their faces, letting the emotions speak for themselves. This cinematic invention does something remarkable. It reframes our understanding of Harry and Hermione's friendship. Throughout the series, Hermione is often the one who steadies Harry, the voice of logic and wisdom. But here, it is Harry who offers comfort. He steps into a new role, not as the chosen hero, but as a compassionate friend. That shift gives the audience a glimpse into his quiet maturity, his empathy, his capacity for gentleness even amid chaos. It reminds us that Harry's true strength has never been his wand, but his heart. The music choice, too, is a masterstroke. O Children is not a song about romance. It is a lament and a prayer. Its lyrics, "Forgive us now for what we've done, we're pointing fingers at everyone," echo the guilt and loss that both characters feel. The melody is haunting, tender, almost sacred. It turns the small tent into a sanctuary and the dance into a kind of ritual. The world outside is collapsing, but inside, two young souls are still resisting despair. The song's refrain, "We're going where the children don't play," seems to mirror their own stolen childhoods. The scene, then, is not just about a dance. It is about mourning innocence and reclaiming it, if only for a moment. When fans first saw the scene, the response was divided. Some accused the filmmakers of creating romantic tension that never existed. Others called it unnecessary. But as years have passed, the perception has shifted. Many now see it as one of the most emotionally authentic moments in the entire series. It reveals the emotional cost of war better than any battle sequence could. It shows that heroism is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it is found in the small acts of kindness that keep people human. In that sense, the scene honors the spirit of Rowling's story even while expanding it. The absence of this moment in the book gives the film its unique voice. Rowling's world is built on words, spells, letters, prophecies, but cinema speaks through images and gestures. The dance is a bridge between the two mediums. It transforms written emotion into movement. It is also a reminder that adaptations, when done with sensitivity, can deepen rather than distort the original. Rowling gave us the characters, the filmmakers gave them breath and body. The dance feels like something that could have happened between the chapters, unseen but real. There is also a quiet tragedy beneath the surface. The dance carries the weight of all that cannot be said. Hermione still loves Ron, Harry still grieves for his parents, for Sirius, for Dumbledore. They are two orphans of different kinds, bound by loss. The dance is not an escape from pain, but a temporary truce with it. When it ends, they return to their silent watch, the radio crackling with news of more deaths. But something has shifted. They have shared warmth, and that is enough to move forward. It is a whisper of life amid the ruins. What elevates this scene above sentimentality is its restraint. Nothing is exaggerated, nothing forced. The lighting is dim and natural, the movement almost clumsy. The realism of it all makes it believable. It captures that universal moment when friends comfort each other, not through speeches, but through shared silence. Every viewer can recognize themselves in it, that desperate attempt to smile when crying seems easier. It becomes not only a scene about Harry and Hermione, but about all who have ever tried to hold on to hope. Thematically, the scene ties perfectly to the larger arc of the Deathly Hallows. It is a story about endurance, about finding meaning when faith falters. The dance, in its modest way, symbolizes the human capacity for light in darkness, the very essence of what the books preach. Harry and Hermione's friendship becomes a microcosm of the resistance against Voldemort, a refusal to let fear dictate the soul. When they sway to that faint music, they are doing the bravest thing imaginable. They are choosing to live, to remember joy. Years after the film's release, this moment remains one of the most discussed scenes in the series. It stands as proof that cinema can sometimes understand emotion better than words. The simplicity of the gesture, the melancholy of the music, the vulnerability of the characters, all fuse into something unforgettable. Without spells, without dialogue, it becomes a kind of magic of its own. The scene does not merely illustrate friendship, it consecrates it. The dance between Harry and Hermione may not exist in the pages of the Deathly Hallows, but it feels as though it has always belonged to that world. It is a quiet heartbeat hidden between paragraphs brought to life on screen. It reminds us that even in a story filled with dragons, curses, and dark lords, the most powerful moments are the human ones, the ones that whisper rather than roar. Through a simple dance, the film gave us a glimpse of what makes these characters endure, not their heroism, but their humanity. And that perhaps is the truest kind of magic. Number 23, The Letter from Hogwarts. It begins with chaos, letters swirling through the air like a storm of parchment and wax seals, the Dursleys' prim and perfect living room dissolving into a frenzy of feathers, paper, and magic. The scene in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, directed by Chris Columbus, remains one of the most recognizable moments in modern cinema, and for good reason. It captures the exact heartbeat of every child who ever dreamed that somewhere out there was a letter waiting for them. A letter that would take them away from the ordinary. The moment when Harry receives his letter from Hogwarts is not merely a scene of revelation. It is the first time in his life that magic doesn't just exist, it belongs to him. In J.K. Rowling's book, the episode is charming but restrained. The description is functional, direct, and moves quickly through the event. The letters kept coming, Rowling writes, pouring out of the fireplace like bullets. The literary version gives us the facts. Letters appear in ever stranger ways. Vernon Dursley panics and Harry remains unable to get his hands on a single one. It's clever, it's whimsical, and it certainly conveys the absurdity of the Dursleys' attempts to stop the inevitable. Yet the written page, all its humour, cannot quite ignite the sensory explosion that the film delivers. Columbus saw in those lines not merely an incident, but a cinematic crescendo, an orchestration of light, motion, and longing. In the film, Daniel Radcliffe, barely 11, becomes the living embodiment of childhood anticipation. His face, illuminated by the soft golden glow of the flying letters, tells an entire story without a single word. For once, Harry is not the unwanted boy under the stairs. For a fleeting moment, he is the center of a miracle. The letters dance around him, spinning like autumn leaves in a magical gale, and his laughter fills the room, a sound the Dursleys clearly haven't heard before. The scene transforms what was, in the novel, a comedic episode of frustration into an emotional awakening. It becomes a portrait of a child finally being noticed by the world. Chris Columbus's direction is often described as warm, almost sentimental, but here his instinct for wonder works perfectly. Every detail of the sequence is calibrated to heighten emotion. The deep hum of John Williams's music swelling beneath the chaos, the sudden burst of envelopes from the fireplace, the fluttering camera movements that make the viewer feel they too are caught in the blizzard of magic. What could have been simple slapstick turns into a symphony of liberation. The walls that once confined Harry literally explode with possibility. It's as though the house itself cannot contain his destiny any longer. The contrast with the earlier scenes in Privet Drive is deliberate and essential. Before the letters, the Dursley home is painted in pale beige and lifeless order. Every object seems suffocatingly clean, every corner neat to the point of sterility. The cinematography mirrors Harry's existence, colourless, muted, oppressed. Then, the moment the first letter slides through the mail slot, a crack appears in that false perfection. The flood that follows is unstoppable. In the book, Vernon simply becomes more desperate, nailing shut the mailbox, boarding up windows. On screen, however, we see the collapse of control. His frantic screams are drowned by the fluttering storm of envelopes, while Harry, instead of hiding, leaps into the air like a boy possessed by joy. It is rebellion through wonder. This visual chaos achieves something that words could only imply. It makes the viewer feel the release. When hundreds of letters burst forth from the fireplace, filling the air, we experience the eruption of magic as Harry does, with awe and disbelief. Each letter carries not just an invitation, but a promise. For Harry, this is not only proof that magic exists, it is proof that someone somewhere has been thinking of him. After years of silence, he is being called by name. The envelope addressed to Mr. H. Potter, the cupboard under the stairs, becomes a symbol of recognition, a tender acknowledgement of a life long ignored. The film holds on that detail for just a second longer than the book, letting the audience absorb its emotional weight. In the original text, the letter's arrival serves primarily to build tension before Hagrid's entrance. Rowling keeps the story brisk. She is eager to get Harry to the hut on the rock. But Columbus chooses to dwell on the moment, turning it into a crescendo of anticipation. It's not about what comes next, it's about this. The bliss of being chosen, the pure, overwhelming joy of belonging. This pause transforms the sequence into one of the emotional pillars of the entire series. Without it, Harry's journey might feel more like destiny imposed upon him. With it, it feels like destiny joyfully embraced. Even the performances of the adult actors contribute to this emotional alchemy. Richard Griffiths as Vernon Dursley, sweating and furious, gives the chaos its comic rhythm. Fiona Shaw's Petunia, clutching her pearls and gasping in horror, embodies the collapse of their false normalcy. The Dursleys are not merely villains, they are symbols of the mundane world's resistance to wonder. And when that world finally cracks open, When letters rain from the ceiling like confetti, we witness the triumph of imagination over control. The film makes the contrast tangible. You can almost feel the air itself change from heavy to light. What makes this sequence superior to the book's version is its emotional layering. In literature, the event is amusing. On screen, it is transcendent. We do not merely learn that Harry is invited to Hogwarts, we experience the liberation of his soul. The set design reinforces this transformation. The once pristine living room becomes a playground of airborne letters, and Harry's laughter, echoed by the triumphant swell of music, turns the scene into a moment of cinematic grace. It is the birth of wonder in the eyes of a child who has known nothing but neglect. The genius of Columbus's adaptation lies in his willingness to let magic feel tangible. The letters are not abstract symbols, they are real, physical objects that strike Harry's skin, brush his hair, pile at his feet. The audience can almost feel their texture, the crisp parchment, the red wax seal. This tactile realism grounds the fantasy. It bridges the distance between the magical and the mundane, reminding us that even miracles must have weight. The book tells us that letters come pouring in, but the film shows us how that feels. The sound of rustling paper, the blur of white envelopes swirling like a snowstorm of hope. There's also a psychological truth embedded in this moment. Harry's joy is not just about magic, it's about being seen. For 10 years, he has been the invisible boy, the unwanted nephew who eats scraps and sleeps under stairs. The film captures his emotional transformation not through words, but through light. As he reaches toward the letters, his face glows, and for the first time, he looks alive. The moment he catches one, even if only for a second before Vernon snatches it away, the audience feels the victory. That fleeting contact is enough to ignite his courage for everything that follows. From a storytelling perspective, this scene performs a vital function. It establishes the tone of wonder that defines the entire series. If the Dursleys' world is grey, Hogwarts must feel golden. By allowing this explosion of colour and sound before we even reach the castle, the filmmakers prepare the emotional contrast that will carry the story forward. The letters scene becomes the first threshold Harry crosses, not into Hogwarts yet, but out of despair. It is a cinematic baptism in possibility. Interestingly, Rowling's later writing suggests that the letters were enchanted to find Harry no matter what. In the book, the Dursleys' frantic moves, from the letter through the slot to the milkman, to the storm of envelopes in the chimney, feel like a running gag, but on film, these escalating absurdities become symbols of inevitability. The magic of Hogwarts will find Harry no matter where he hides. It is destiny, but it's presented not as doom, but as joy. The viewer understands instinctively that this letter is more than paper. It is fate written in ink. Even the physical comedy, which could have been merely childish, gains a sense of grandeur. Vernon swinging a shotgun at invisible invaders, Dudley hiding under the table, it all plays like a last stand against wonder itself. And when Harry stands amidst the storm, laughing, it's clear who has won. The letter is not yet in his hands, but it's already his. The film captures that paradox perfectly, the idea that magic, once awakened, cannot be stopped. Ultimately, the reason this cinematic version surpasses the literary one lies in emotion. Books rely on imagination, films on empathy. The page makes us picture, the screen makes us feel. Watching those letters fill the air, we do not just witness Harry's joy, we share it. It becomes our own childhood rediscovered for a moment, the impossible suddenly real. The film turns what was a narrative, beat into an emotional revelation. In those few minutes, Chris Columbus distilled the heart of Harry Potter, the belief that magic might, at any moment, come flying through the mail slot and change everything. The sequence remains unforgettable not because of its spectacle but because of its sincerity. There is no cynicism, no irony, just pure, unguarded wonder. The boy who once lived under the stairs now stands in a rain of invitations to another world, and the look on his face tells the audience everything they need to know. The book gave us the idea, the film gave it breath. Through movement, music, and light, the simple act of receiving a letter became one of the most iconic images of modern cinema, a symbol of hope that even in the most ordinary life, magic can find a way in. Number 24. Harry's resurrection in the forest. The moment when Harry Potter returns to life in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 2 stands as one of the few instances where the film transcends the book. The scene, placed in the heart of the Forbidden Forest, where life and death finally meet in a quiet confrontation, carries a kind of visual poetry that words alone could never achieve. The book by J.K. Rowling describes this moment in a restrained, almost philosophical tone. It is a passage steeped in abstraction, a white, endless space, a strange station of thought and memory. Yet the film transforms it into something tangible and emotionally shattering. It becomes an image of transcendence, the boundary between two worlds captured in light and silence. In the book, when Harry is struck by Voldemort's killing curse, he awakens not in the forest but in a place like King's Cross Station. Rowling writes he was not lying on the ground, he was not touching it, but lying suspended in nothingness without walls or ceiling. It is a space of pure consciousness without body or pain. Dumbledore appears before him calm and luminous, and explains the mystery of the Horcrux within Harry. It is a beautiful and profound chapter, filled with spiritual weight, but it relies entirely on words, metaphors for the afterlife, philosophy about choice and destiny. The reader imagines the whiteness, the peace, but the image remains abstract, internal, a dream shaped by thought. The film, directed by David Yates, transforms this dream into a vision. When Harry awakens after Voldemort's curse, the forest dissolves. The screen is flooded with white light, the edges of reality blurred, as if the world has been washed away. The air seems to breathe. The floor beneath Harry gleams like polished marble, but it is endless, stretching into infinity. There are no walls, no sense of direction, only light, silence, and the faint echo of life. This is not a literal station, but a realm between being and non-being, rendered in pure visual metaphor. It is what cinema can do that literature cannot. It gives shape to the unseen. In this space, Dumbledore stands before him, not as the flawed, conflicted man the books revealed, but as a figure of serene wisdom. His robes ripple like mist. His eyes reflect both sadness and joy, as though he knows he is no longer part of the living world. The film captures him not as a person but as an idea, a guide for Harry's soul. The softness in his face, the kindness in his tone, and the endless whiteness surrounding them turn their meeting into something sacred. When he tells Harry, "Do not pity the dead, Harry, pity the living, and above all, those who live without love," the words no longer belong merely to a mentor, but to a voice from beyond life itself. The most haunting image, however, is not Dumbledore's serenity, but what lies nearby, the small, twisted form of something screaming without sound. The film reveals it under a bench, pale and trembling, like a dying creature. It is what remains of Voldemort's soul, the part that lived within Harry, now exposed and dying. The book describes it with philosophical detachment. It was small, naked, and looked less than human, curled on the ground, trembling under a seat where it had been abandoned. On the page, it is an idea of guilt and corruption. On screen, it becomes unbearable to look at. The pale creature, gasping, shrinking, represents the cost of immortality, the physical manifestation of what evil does to the soul. Its fragility and suffering make the moment painfully real. It is the kind of image that burns itself into memory. This is the strength of cinema, its ability to evoke emotion through vision. The forest sequence before Harry's death is already filled with tension. As he walks through the trees, the sound fades and only the rustle of leaves and the beat of his heart remain. He carries no wand. The light of his friends burns behind him, fading with every step. By the time he meets Voldemort, the air is still. There are no grand gestures, no dramatic music, only resignation. When the spell strikes him, the screen cuts to white. That moment of pure light, followed by the quiet awakening in the white world, connects the two realities like a breath drawn between heartbeats. The audience feels what words could only suggest: the calm after pain, the release after fear. The King's Cross scene in the book is long, filled with explanation. Dumbledore tells Harry that he must choose whether to return or go on. He explains the Elder Wand, the connection between Harry and Voldemort, the final meaning of sacrifice. It is, in many ways, an intellectual closure to the series' moral puzzle. But in the film, the dialogue becomes secondary to atmosphere. The conversation is stripped to its essence. Not a lecture, but a benediction. The light wraps around them. The score by Alexandre Desplat moves softly, like a heartbeat fading. The silence between words becomes more powerful than the words themselves.